Good evening, members. Welcome to Area Planning Subcommittee East. First of all, item 1, and I'll ask Democratic Services to read the webcasting, please.
This meeting is to be webcast, and the chairman will read the following announcement, or I will, sorry, I should have read that first, shouldn't I? I would like to remind everyone that this meeting will be filmed live or recorded and uploaded to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings. If any public speaker on MS Teams do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Members and public speakers are reminded to turn on their microphones before speaking and to turn them off again when they're finished.
Thank you. Item 2 is the advice to public speakers. I think you probably know that you have 3 minutes, and officer has seen you regarding microphones and turning them on and off. Okay. Item 3 is the apologies for absence.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Amos, Hadley, Jones and Balcom.
Are there any other apologies? No, right. Item 4. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Item 5. The minutes of the last meeting. To confirm the minutes of the 26th of June on pages 6 and 7. All members happy with those? Okay. Item 6 is any other business. Just to go on that, item 9 has been withdrawn on the agenda. Item 7 is site visits.
Chairman, sorry, could you explain why that item's been withdrawn, or would you like me to?
Yes, please.
The Parish Council have withdrawn their objection, and therefore under the Constitution that is now delegated back to officers for decision.
Okay, thank you. Item site visits. Anybody asking for a site visit? If not, we'll move on. Item 8 is application EPF 073624, Wyland Tree 46 The Plain, Epping. And I'll ask our planning officer to who's on Zoom? Who's it tonight?
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. I just set my screen so that you can all see it. Just bear with me. Can you all see it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This application relates to land at 66 The Plain, Epping. The applicant is seeking to demolish the existing property and construct 3 new detached houses. The proposal is before members tonight due to it being recommended for approval and more than 5 objections being received from neighbours. The concerns raised are listed on page 12 of the agenda. This slide shows the application site outlined in red. It's located on the eastern side of the plain. Long-time members may recall a site visit which took place in March of 2022 in connection with the previous application for 4 houses. The site contains a detached 1.5-storey chalet bungalow situated on the eastern side of the private road section of the plain and runs adjacent to the rear of the new Kingswood Park estate. To the immediate north of the site are garages which are connected to the flats at the lodge. It's surrounded by residential properties as well on all other sides. The application site is located outside of the Greenbelt and has no heritage designation. Additional comments have been received since the publication of the agenda from 78 and 80 The Plain, which adjoin the rear of the site. They have requested that due to their unique position and shallow gardens, if planning permission is given, the following conditions be imposed. No attic conversion or introduction of dormer windows, that the planting of the Himalayan birch trees be disallowed, with only trees that grow to a maximum of 3 metres high to be planted instead. That a double-skin brick retaining wall be constructed between the boundaries of the development and numbers 76 and 78 and 80 the plain, i.e. the rear wall. This should be a minimum height of 2.5 metres to mitigate against both additional noise from the new development and serve to minimise any loss of privacy. This should be put in place prior to any demolition of the current bungalow. And finally, that any building works be restricted to Monday to Friday and only between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. This slide shows a 3D Google image of the site in its context. The application site is an anomaly in its context, as the plot is much wider than the surrounding plots. The top 2 photos of this slide show the private access road and the front area of the site. The bottom left shows the mutual boundary with 66A, the plain. The occupier of this property supports the application. The bottom right shows the brick wall of the garages serving flats within the lodge. You can also see the rear elevation of the lodge. The top left image shows the view of the existing garage building within the site. Behind that is the garage at 66A, the plain, and above this garage you can see the first floor projection of 66A, the plain, which extends further forward than the existing rear elevation of the application site. That building has a large first floor rear window. Then the bottom left is a photo taken from inside the bungalow at ground floor level, and you can see 80 the plain. And the last photograph shows the rear elevation of the bungalow. This application is an amendment to 2 identical previously refused schemes. The 2 previous inspectors found that the massing and the height of the refused scheme was acceptable in design terms. However, the inspector dealing with the refused scheme under EPF 0384/21 did raise concerns about the impact of the proposal to the residents at 78 and 80 the plain in terms of privacy and dominance. This application, the amendment to that changes made includes the number of the proposed dwellings being reduced from 4, i.e. 2 pairs of detached semi-detached houses, to 3 detached dwellings. The design of the proposed properties have changed from a townhouse style to a detached tipped roof properties. And the overall depth of the houses have also been reduced so that they no longer extend back. They don't extend further back than the existing building line of the existing property. At the bottom of the slide is the current scheme. The red line shows the extent of the refused scheme, and the purple line shows the extent of the existing bungalow. This slide shows the existing and proposed elevations. Each house measures 4.95 metres high at each level and 8.65 metres high to the ridge of their hipped roofs. The design and access statement indicates that the finished floor levels of the houses will be 0.27 metres lower than that currently. This will be controlled by condition 12. The width of the houses will be 7.8 metres and they will have a maximum depth of 11 metres. The height of the ridge of each dwelling is 0.85 metres higher than the existing dwelling. This slide shows the existing and proposed site plan. 2 car parking spaces are provided for each dwelling. Landscaping is proposed for the front forecourt and the rear garden areas. This slide shows a generated computer image of the site. This slide shows the proposed site plan at roof level. You can see that it also includes solar panels. The bottom plan is a section showing the slope of the land in relation to the neighbouring dwellings. The red line shows the dashed line of the previously refused scheme. The top plan shows distances between the bungalow and the proposal. This is a plan of the bungalow, but since the position is the same as the bungalow, you can see that the distance will be 22.5 metres. And there's an existing neighbouring dwelling at 66A, which is 19.6 metres away from the residential property opposite. The revised design addresses the concerns the inspector raised under EPF 0384 of 21. It's therefore considered that the proposal has an acceptable design which will not cause excessive harm to amenity of neighbouring dwellings. Sufficient parking has been provided for this sustainable location and no objections have been raised by Highways Authority in relation to highway safety. The proposal has a recommendation for approval subject to conditions and the completion of a unilateral undertaking to mitigate the effects of the proposal on the FSAC. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now we have one objector, Mr. Richard Gibson. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Gibson.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak with you this evening. As you know, this is a successor application to ones that have failed, been appealed and failed again. Whilst I accept that this new application is a big step forward to acceptability, it does for me still represent an overdevelopment of the site and needs to be moderated downwards still more. In particular, the application impacts numbers 76, 78 and 80 of the plane, the properties immediately behind the development. The reason for this, as witnessed by members of the committee in 2022, is that our gardens are significantly lower than the ground occupied by 66 the plane, thereby accentuating the impact and scale of the new houses. Whilst I accept that there is reference in the new application to a reduction in floor level for the new development by 0.27 metres, I contend that the overall height of the new builds still represents an unacceptable loss of light and blocking of view. As the officer has indicated, this reduction in height needs to be confirmed in the conditions applied should the application be approved. Time does not allow me to list the detail of the objections raised in response to the application, and they are in fact contained within the officer's report. I do want to highlight in the time that I have that should the application be approved, which I hope it is not, that the conditions we have requested get listed with the approval. I want to say here and now that the applicant has agreed to these conditions, and that is acknowledged by the officer at the foot of page 8. My issue is that these have not been attached to the permission in pages 15 onwards. Unfamiliar with the process undertaken, I would like to ask members to formally mandate this evening that if approved, these conditions are part of the approval. Specifically, what we requested is the following. 1, that no attic conversion / introduction of dormer windows be allowed at any future date. 2, that the planting of the 2 birch trees, which grow to 15 metres tall, be disallowed, with only trees that grow to a maximum of 3 metres high to be allowed. 3, that double-skin brick wall, retaining wall, to be constructed between the boundaries of the development and numbers 76, 78 and 80 of the plane, i.e. the rear wall. This should be to a minimum height of 2.5 metres to mitigate against both the additional noise from the development and serve to minimise the level of being overlooked and protect the privacy of those in the new development which have the higher ground as well as ourselves. This should run parallel to the existing garages and boundaries of the development and property 76. This should be put in place prior to any demolition and construction of the current bungalow. Number 4, that any building works be restricted to Monday to Friday, excluding public holidays, and only between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. If time allows, one final point, which wasn't written beforehand, I would also contend that any comparison to 66A, the plane that the officer just went through, is not relevant to this particular application. That's me.
Thank you. We now have the Town Council, Epping Town Council? Not represented. Okay, we have the applicant's agent, Mr Tom Whiffin.
Good evening, members. As you are aware, this is our third time seeing this application come through this planning committee. I fully believe that the scheme in front of you is the best scheme to date for the site and makes best use of the site for the years to come. Our proposal for 3 detached houses is a large reduction on the previous application submitted. We've reduced from 4 houses to 3, drastically altered the roof design to a hipped roof design instead of a mansard style with a flat top. The spacing between the houses has been increased and there is now much improved soft landscaping to the front of the site. The design is a reduction in the bulk and height from the previous scheme. Comments have been made about the lack of parking. However, as confirmed by Highways, we are in accordance with the standards and they have raised no objections. Comments have also been raised about the number of people living in the dwellings. Typically, these will be for a family of 4 or 5 people, and therefore the total number of occupants is likely to be much less than stated in some of the comments. Comments raised about the quality of the road have also been made. However, as mentioned in the officer's report, this is a private road, and therefore this is up to the private owner to sort or the residents to group together to get this fixed, and not the council. 2 additional houses on the street could go a long way in helping contribute to the improvement of the road. The proposal creates 3 modern, very energy-efficient homes which exceed the technical housing standards. There are 4 double bedrooms as well as a study on the ground floor to allow for home working. The houses will have solar panels on, EV charging points, and either a very energy-efficient boiler or an air source heat pump to heat the houses. The biodiversity on the site has also been improved by 16.3% by the way of additional planting of trees and hedging on the site. The reduction in properties has also reduced the number of windows on the rear of the site. The existing dwelling has around 8 windows, whereas our proposal has only 6 windows on the rear, therefore reducing any impact on the neighbours. The rear of the proposed dwellings are on the same line of the existing rear dormer on the existing property, therefore there is no increased impact onto the neighbours. The finished floor level, as the planner said, will be reduced to further reduce any impact on the neighbours, as well as improve access into the dwellings for any persons. The members will be aware of the obligations regarding Section 106 agreements, and we have already sent in a draft Section 106 agreement to the planning officer, and the council's legal team have already written to us regarding the fees. As soon as our scheme is voted to be approved through this committee, we will arrange for these to be paid in full. Our clients wish to start on site as soon as possible to provide 3 quality homes to Epping. This will help with Epping Forest's housing supply issues, where over the last few years they've only been able to construct 7% of the housing requirements over the previous 3 years, according to the government's housing delivery tests. I trust that you can support and approve our application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to speak. This was in my former district council ward, and I lost this part as part of the boundary review, but I was very engaged with the previous application and discussions around it, so I just wanted to say a couple of words this evening, if that was okay. And I think the first thing that I wanted to address was a potential site visit, which I would have suggested if I was on the committee this evening. This property is very unusual. Those who were on the committee 2 years ago will remember wading through piles of letters and leaflets trying to get in. But the setting is very unusual. We also visited the properties on the plain, and seeing the potential impact of those properties was something that was very concerning to members at the time. So if I had been on the committee this evening, I would have suggested that possibly a site visit would have been appropriate. It's also kind of fitting quite a lot onto a site as well, which would have been one of my concerns, but it is an unusual site, and without a doubt something needs to happen here. It's been derelict for many years now, isn't a particularly attractive property on a road of many attractive properties and very well kept flats, so absolutely action needs to be taken. However, the points I really wanted to make tonight were in sympathy with the neighbours backing on to the site. For me, although I acknowledge the work of the developer to reduce the application, and I think they've come a long way, and it's certainly more acceptable than what was previously put forward, I still believe this to be an overdevelopment of the site. 3 properties on this pretty narrow space, I think would be overwhelming to the people behind. Actually, I'd have quite significant issues around access on and off the road as well, and the impact to neighbours. I think the points made in terms of conditions were very prominent, particularly around the construction and making sure that they weren't disruptive to those already living on the road. So I certainly support those conditions there. And actually, a very cheeky suggestion that I would make also, if on the committee tonight, is that with the Section 106 payments and funding, they could look at improving that private road as part of that agreement there to a greater extent. But I would be unable to support the application this evening if I was sitting on the committee, which is the reason I am speaking tonight, and on behalf of residents on the plain on the other side. I think there are still various issues with overlooking and overdevelopment on this site, and while without a doubt it needs to be developed, I think this is a step too far at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, as has been said, it's had a long history. I think one of the more significant changes with this application is the change, so the rear of the property is in line with the building line and the other properties along that road, so it's not closer at the back to the plain properties, but clearly that is something that could be changed under permitted development. So I do think the suggested condition to remove permitted development would be a sensible one, so that it retains that position in the building line. I mean, it's mentioned in the design and access statement the importance of keeping to that existing building line at the back. I think the change in mansard hipped roofs is quite significant in terms of the outlook and the gaps between the properties. Clearly access is an issue for the County Council, and I did look at the County Council comments, and they've not raised any issues on access. And I suppose, clearly you've got quite a busy road at the bottom, and I suppose the County Council would argue that 2 extra houses onto the main road between Epping and North Weald is not a significant percentage difference. Sorry, 2 extra houses, because there's one there existingly. On the planting, I can see how that's an issue that different people would look at differently. Some people love the idea of more trees. Other people see trees as a nuisance, or the wrong trees in the wrong place. I'm inclined to take the tree officer's advice on there, but if we did have a condition to remove it, I'm assuming we'd need to find an alternative way to make the biodiversity gain that's mentioned, and perhaps we could get some clarification on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnard and Councillor Janet Whitehouse, this is in your ward. Do you any comments? Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to doing the site visit, I think many of us were on this committee when we had the opportunity to do a site visit before. I certainly remember going on the site visit. Yes, I'd like clarification about the trees. The objector, Mr Gibson, has asked for has particularly mentioned the trees in his objections, and I assume those are going to be moved to conditions, as has been asked for many times. The tree officers were happy with the original planting scheme. What actually is the situation now with regard to trees? I'm no expert on trees, but I can understand wanting them to be too tall.
Chairman, can I take that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So the tree officer saw the original proposal with the Himalayan birch trees. It would be acceptable to change it to a different type of tree that only grew to 3 metres, and we could change so condition 7 could be revised to just include a standard soft landscaping and hard landscaping proposal, which requires also that the trees included in it would grow no higher than 3 metres. Councillor Whitehouse was correct. It is a personal taste. Given that the tree officer was in support of the original scheme, I left it for members to make the final decision on whether they felt that the standard condition was acceptable with the Himalayan birch, or whether it should be amended in line with the neighbours' concerns.
Thank you.
Either or is acceptable. Yeah.
Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Given the applicant has agreed with the outline of the points raised by the complainant, I would like to see those written into the conditions. Can we propose that?
Oh, yes. Can you get nearer the microphone?
Sorry.
I don't think the Luke system is on, is it? Oh, it is. Okay. Your proposal was?
To add the 4 points raised by the complainant as conditions on the planning application.
We have to wait to make a decision first.
No. Have you a seconder for that? Do you want to speak?
Chairman, I wasn't sure from what the planning officer said in response to my question whether those conditions had automatically been moved. So many people asked for it, but I'm having real difficulty in hearing what the planning officer is saying. So, I mean, if they haven't been moved into conditions, they have to be, and if that's the way to do it with Councillor Barnard's proposal, then I'll second it. But I still don't know whether they've been moved automatically already or not.
So the existing conditions, sorry Chairman, can I speak?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So condition 18 is a standard removal of permitted development rights condition, and I can remove, it currently says A, B and E classes, but I can add C, which excludes velexes as well. So if members are happy with that condition 18 as amended, that would remove permitted development rights, and then they'd have to apply for any further extensions on the property, and we will then have control over it at that time should they put an application in. Then so as discussed, the tree condition can be dealt with as a standard landscape condition, and the condition 17 can be amended to include the boundary treatment for a double skin brick wall to be constructed between the boundaries of 76, 78 and 80 the plane. It shall be a minimum height of 2.5 metres high. The fourth condition relates to the hours of construction. There is a standard condition 21. It excludes Sundays and bank holidays. The only difference will be on Saturdays. So technically speaking, the planning authority is not the correct authority on hours of construction work. It would really be an environmental health matter, but if members feel that it would be, they would want to remove Saturdays as well, I can change the condition to reflect that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to reiterate really what Suki has said, obviously we feel that we can amend the conditions accordingly so that they adhere to what the residents' concerns have been. Absolutely no issues there. And in terms of the last condition, that's absolutely fine. We can change that as well.
Councillor Kiska.
Thank you, Chairman. I well remember going to the site visit. This was an unusual location, and I remember going out in the back gardens and seeing the slope of the land, so I'm aware of the problems there. Also that the adjoining building had quite a big garage unit alongside this, so we were aware of all these facts when we did the site visit. Perhaps 3 is a little cramped, but these days I don't think it's something that I would refuse on. The conditions that the objector has put forward, and which I would fully support, I think are reasonable, and I think with the the change in those conditions, I would support this. I have to say, Section 106 money, I'm not sure can be spent on private property. I think it has to be something in our gift, which obviously a private road is not. So I have to say that with the alterations to the conditions that have been put forward, and we have a proposal and a seconder, if you need them to be separate conditions, I would be supporting this application. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't repeat what colleagues have said, but I echo what Councillor Kesk has just said, and also I wanted to point out that I think that this is a much improved scheme from the previous one, although I can't remember my vote on the previous scheme, but looking at it, if it was today, I still think that would have been acceptable, but I think this is by far better. I think the openness is better. I think that the sheer shape of the properties in itself does create more openness, and I know if I was a neighbour objecting to the original application, I would understand the objector's appreciation of the existing scheme, and I also appreciate why, if you objected to the first one, you'd also want to object to this one. So I think actually what we do have here is perhaps a happy medium where there can be some conditions applied where we might be able to reach that neighbourly consensus. The point I did just want to make, whilst it's not a material planning consideration, is that I do see the benefit, if the road is in such a state, to having some additional residents on the road, because that can only reduce the cost going forwards of maintenance to the road, but also increase the chance of the road being improved. So I'm actually very much on the view that this application should be granted, and I would support those additional conditions. With regards to the trees, I don't know how essential our decision on the trees is. I would be more accustomed to the local residents within that road currently making a bit more of a decision on what trees and where. Whether that's possible with planning terms, I'm not sure, but I would sooner people that live there, that know the road far better than we do, decide what happens for biodiversity. But whatever happens, we must ensure the biodiversity is a net gain, and it seems as though that can be achieved. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as the biodiversity is a net gain, I'm personally not too fussed, but I would sooner have people in the area decide than people here who do not live in the road.
Okay, okay. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point about the landscaping condition, it's not usual practice for us to consult on condition applications. Usually they are dealt with under delegated powers, and we would obviously discuss with the Tree and Landscaping Officer as to the appropriate way forward. Officers have noted what members have said in regard to the height and nature of the trees, and we will obviously take that into consideration and ensure that the trees are appropriate for the scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Dad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't go to the site visit, but I have actually been on the public realm, and I'd like to thank the speakers for making their representations. There's one thing that I do want to the committee to consider, and that is in the appeal decision from the inspector, point 24, she said she'd found there'd been minor harm to the character and appearance of the area, but significant harm to the living conditions of certain nearby occupiers. And what she had actually mentioned there was the lack of sunlight, which was from the south and the west, sunlight into their back gardens because of the steepness and the height of the roofs. And I think this is a very important point, and that is the point that she actually dismissed the appeal on, and I don't think we've talked about that yet this evening, and that makes a big difference to occupiers if they get no sun, and particularly, and in the inspector's report, it said at particular times of the year, as you know, when the sun is low in the sky, they're going to get virtually no sun in their garden at all. It's a very small garden, and the height, the height eaves might be lower, but as far as I could see from the plans, and the officer might like to put it up again, it's the same edge of roof height, and they are steep roofs. They don't have to be steep roofs. They could be shallower. You could also have the second floor with dormers in there. There's all sorts of other designs, and I don't think there's enough consideration for the significant harm to the living conditions. I don't think they've been addressed significantly enough, and at this stage, unless I hear anything else, I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for allowing me to come in at this point. Just in terms of the appeal decision, the Vice Chair is completely correct when she mentions the minor harm on the character and appearance of the area, and the inspector in regard to that matter talks about the close proximity of the buildings, which we are of the view have now been overcome. In terms of impact on neighbours, at paragraph 15 of the appeal decision, the inspector actually concludes that the proposal would not lead to excessive loss of daylight and sunlight at 78 and 80 the Plain. Nevertheless, the proposed development would significantly harm the living conditions of occupiers 78 and 80 in terms of outlook and privacy. So it was only outlook and privacy that were considered to be a concern by the inspector.
Okay, thank you. Members, any...
They want to go for the motion and the additional conditions for clarity. If members want to, then you've got a proposal.
You've got.
Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, just on the point the Vice Chairman made, I think it's a very valid one. Can I just ask, with the current property that exists, or existed, I don't know if it's still that, would that not have had any impact at all on neighbouring properties in its current form? Because I can see it's a significant structure. It's not like we're building on a field where there's been absolutely no obstruction. We have a significant dwelling there already. So how much worse? Is it a case that it's getting even worse, or is it just the case? Because from what I've seen from the plans, is we have one large building which is turning into 3 smaller buildings with, from what I can see, more gaps for sunlight. So I'm just intrigued by what. I just would like some clarity on that, because it's a very important point. I think people's amenity is very important. It's an important consideration. So just wondered if you were able to answer that question.
Perhaps if I could ask Suki to bring up a site plan just to show the distances between the existing building and the existing houses, and if we can look at the proposal and the distances. I don't know if, Suki, if you want to comment on whether or not you think the existing building has a negative impact on the neighbours.
So the position of the proposal is it on the same location as the existing bungalow. The eaves level is lower, so the impact on the neighbour shouldn't be much worse than the existing situation in terms of light. Because as Councillor McIver says, there's benefits through the gaps between the property as well. A daylight and sunlight test hasn't been submitted, but I don't think that this proposal would fail it.
As said previously, daylight and sunlight aren't an issue as per the appeal decision. I guess what members are asking about at the moment is to do with loss of privacy and outlook, which is what was raised by the inspector. It's our officer's view that the impact would be the same at the moment. Obviously, every residential dwelling more or less backs onto another dwelling, and there's always an element of impact one way or another, and it's our view that the proposal would not increase that impact.
Given the urban location and the character of the surrounding area.
John Whitehouse.
Can I suggest we vote on the proposal with the conditions?
Councillor Keska?
Yes, I would support that. And I must say we've added plenty of conditions in the past with regard to working hours, so I don't think that's a problem either. It may overlap other departments, but we've put them in conditions many times before. So I would also support the conditions proposed.
Okay. Suki, you're going to speak, or you going to
Sorry,
comment?
Chairman, I've just saying that Councillor Bonwich has got his hand up, just in case you missed it.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I didn't see your hand go up. If you'd like to speak to us, please. Councillor
Yeah,
Bonwich.
sure. Thank you, Suki. Apologies for not being there in person, Chairman, and my colleagues. I have a work commitment that I had to leave late for. But just wanted to ask about, I've looked through the County Council parking standards, and it mentions vans twice in the 80-page document, and I just want to know whether there is enough on-site parking allocated in these spaces for someone to have a van on their drive without it crossing over onto the pavement, because understandably a lot of people who have vans with valuable tools in would not want to leave it out on the street where it is vulnerable to thieves potentially. So is there enough on-site parking for someone to park on the drives in a van? I'm conscious I can't vote on this decision tonight, but I just appreciate an answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
So, the 2 parking spaces meet the current space standards for a standard car. Can I ask that the architect just confirm the dimensions? Off the top of my head, I can't remember the dimensions of a van parking space. It may be possible if they were to position only a van and no other car on the site, they could probably do that. But I can't this evening just confirm whether or not a standard van could park across the whole width.
So if I could just come in, I mean, obviously vans come in all shapes and sizes, our test, the thing that we are considering is whether or not your standard domestic vehicle can be parked on the site, and we have concluded that that is indeed the case. If the concern is about construction, obviously we could make sure there's a condition, making sure there's a construction management plan, but quite honestly, with construction of most sites, there is an element and a degree of disruption, and there's very little we can really do in those cases.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Yeah. So we'll have a proposal that we for this application.
You need to vote on the proposed amended conditions first.
Sorry, yeah.
Proposed amended conditions need to be voted on.
Amended conditions have we got? Who was that? Was that from you, Councillor Keska?
No, Chairman. I said I supported it.
Councillor Whitehouse, John Whitehouse.
The amended conditions were to do with the boundary treatment in condition 17 and amending that in line with the suggestion of the planning officer, and the permitted development. The suggestion was that Velux window, the class of permitted development, be changed to include Velux windows as well as dormers.
For clarity, I think the amendments were for amendments in line with the objector for conditions 7, 18 and 17, I think.
And 21.
And 21, thanks, Vicky. So I think you need to put that to the vote, Chairman.
So can we put that condition to the vote? Those in favour of approving that?
Are you voting, Chairman?
Not tonight, no.
8 in favour.
Okay.
Against?
Anybody against? Any abstentions? 2.
2 abstentions. Carried.
Okay. So I think that finishes that item.
No,
doesn't it?
no, you've got to vote.
Oh, well, yes.
On the officer's recommendation.
We vote now for the officer's recommendation to approve the application. Those in favour?
9. Against?
Yep.
1. Thank you. That's carried, so that's been approved in line with the officer's conditioned with additional conditions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right. Item, as I mentioned earlier, item 9 has been withdrawn due to the parish council, or town council, I should say, withdrawing their objections. So item 10 is EPF 0450/24, land east of Shearing Lower Road, on pages 35 to 48 of the agenda. If you've got the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be taking this one on Teams.
Okay, if you'd like to present the application, please, Mohammed.
So item 10 relates to land east of Shearing Lower Road in Lower Shearing. This application is before members as the recommendation is for approval and an objection from the parish and local residents have been received on planning grounds. The application is for outline planning permission with all matters reserved except for access. So for clarity, members are only considering the principle of the development, the access and other material consideration as outlined in the agenda. Matters related to scale, the building heights, appearance of the buildings, layout and landscaping are to be fully assessed via a future reserved matters application. So the proposal is for the construction of up to 9 dwellings, and this site is allocated within the adopted local plan for approximately 14 dwellings. And since its adoption, the site has been taken out of the green belt. So turning to the slides, here we have the location plan. There's a site outlined in red over here. Here's an aerial view of the site. That's Lower Shearing Road. So here's an indicative proposed site plan of what the proposed up to 9 units could be accommodated on site. But this is only indicative at the moment. And here's the proposed highway improvement. So as part of the existing access, the visibility will need to be improved to accommodate the future residents and the cars. So this has been secured by a condition. And here's the street view of the site, including the access. So in terms of the full merits of the case are set out within the agenda, and I will just summarize the case. The proposal satisfies the site-specific policy requirements as set out in detail in the agenda. Whilst only indicative, the suggested layout would safeguard the living condition of neighbouring amenities, the protected trees, the highway network, and would provide a good level of accommodation for future users. There would also be benefits from the construction and occupation of the homes, along with further benefits to open space. Overall, the proposal would deliver homes on an allocated site in line with the visions and objectives of the adopted local plan, of which one is to provide a mix of new homes within the district to meet the needs of existing and future generations. For these reasons, officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions and a completed Section 106 legal agreement. Thank you, Chair. That's the end.
We've just got no objector, no parish councillor, just the applicant's agent, Mr. Tom Arlington.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members of the committee. My name is Tom Allington. I work for Saunders Planning Consultants, and I speak tonight on behalf of the applicants in favour of the outline application. We've worked positively with the Council's planning officer, who we thank for their cooperative and positive approach in progressing the application to this stage. The application before committee is outlined with all matters reserved except for details of access, and so the main scope for consideration is principle of development and the details of access, as Mohammed has outlined. The application is up to 9 dwellings on land to the east side of Lower Shearing Road, as you've seen from the plans, which is allocated for residential development in the Epping Forest Local Plan under site reference LSHR.R1, and accordingly the site was removed from the Greenbelt when the plan was adopted in March 2023. It's acknowledged that the proposal is for up to 9 dwellings and the site is allocated in the plan for approximately 14 dwellings. However, the figure provided in the local plan is an approximate number which is based on indicative density being applied to the entire site area. With the benefit of having had several surveys and reports carried out to support the application, it's apparent that the suitable capacity for the site is 9 dwellings when taking into account the various constraints and sensitivities of the site. For example, several areas of the site need to provide open spaces and buffers for ecology. This is illustrated in the indicative layout plan that was just shown. Detailed access plans have been submitted, which you've just seen, which are supported by the Essex County Highways Department, following some minor amendments. The access for the proposed development will be in the same position as the existing agricultural access. A Bournemouth T-junction will be provided onto Shearing Lower Road, including a 2-metre wide footpath into the site. The access will benefit from sufficient vision displays in both directions to ensure that the access will be safe and suitable, and the access as proposed has been informed by up-to-date speed and traffic surveys at this location on the road. While matters of layout and appearance are reserved, as mentioned, an indicative layout plan has been provided, which is landscape-led and which is informed by a number of studies, including tree surveys and ecology surveys. The indicative layout for 9 houses would retain the vast majority of the existing trees, which would be enhanced with additional planting, and the open space to the northern corner of the site would also be retained. Furthermore, a wide landscape buffer would also be provided along the rear eastern edge of the site to retain a strong buffer to the remaining greenbelt and the open countryside beyond. The application is also accompanied by a flood risk assessment and sustainable drainage strategy, and these have been found to be acceptable by both the Council's drainage officer and Essex County Lead Local Flood Authority. The drainage strategy would include permeable paving throughout the site and on-site attenuation, achieving runoff rates either equivalent to or actually less than the existing greenfield runoff rate. So just to summarise, the application is for residential development of a site which is allocated in the Epping Forest Local Plan and would provide for the delivery of much needed homes. We work positively with the Council's planning officer in providing a policy-compliant proposal, and the application is supported by all statutory consultees at both the district and county councils, including highways, ecology, trees and landscaping, drainage and environmental health officers. For these reasons, the application is recommended for approval by our planning officers, and so we respectfully request the committee support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, comments or questions? Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Pleased to see that this is one of our local plan sites coming forward. Although it's slightly reduced numbers, I think it's been quite a well thought out plan. Glad to see the reduction and glad to see the open spaces. Also pleased to hear that the permeable paving has been put in place throughout the site to mitigate some of the flood risk that's been mentioned in the paperwork. My only concern is about money for Lower Shearing via Section 106, because I know Lower Shearing Parish Council are looking for a suitable site themselves within Lower Shearing, so because they have nowhere and they have certain funds at the moment, and I thought a contribution towards their savings pot would have assisted them in finding a future home going forward. So if anything could be considered regarding, say, a Section 106 to Lower Shearing, so that it's for the purpose entirely of Lower Shearing, I think that that is the way forward as well. I know that money's probably quite tight, but as we sort of increase the size of the properties but reduce the density, hopefully that can offset and provide some funds for much needed accommodation at the Parish Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just asked the planning officer regarding.
Mohammed wants to come on.
Chair, if I may
sorry.
clarify this point. I assume Councillor Bedford is referring to a community facility for lower shearing. In terms of the infrastructure delivery plan, one has not been identified, and in order to seek Section 106 fund, it needs to be seal compliant. There are certain tests, so it needs to be related to this development and necessary for it to be acceptable. As it's not been identified in the IDP, there are no reasonable grounds to secure any or request any funds towards the community facility from this scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps the officer could answer me a question. As this is outlined at the moment and not actually firm in detail, is there a possibility then that we could ask the officers to consider this at the point that the final plan comes forward?
We can only secure any Section 106 at the outline stage. The reserve matters is more limited to the specific details, but it can only be secured at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. We better get used to quite a few of these. The current government wants us to build on everything that's currently in the green belt, so there's going to be a lot more of these schemes coming forward. I have to think this is a good scheme, and the 2 points raised by the parish council was highways, and I think that the adjustments to the sight line on the site covers that, and flooding, and we've already heard that officers both from EFDC and Essex are quite happy with the arrangements made for flooding. So as far as I'm concerned, absolutely no reason not to pass this tonight.
Okay. Just before we go further, I should mention that I'm a member of Shearing Parish Council, so I probably should have declared an interest. But yes, they are looking for facilities for lower shearing. Yeah. Any other comments? No? Right. Where were we? I think that's it, yeah. No more to be said. It does come under my ward with Councillor Hadley and Councillor Balcom, but none of those are here, and I have no comment to make on it. So, vote on the application then. Yes, better. Those in favour then. Anybody against? One against. And abstentions?
Chairman, can you just clarify where your vote was on that, please?
I wasn't voting then.
You're not voting,
No,
so you're abstaining?
No, because I'm abstained.
Okay. So in that case, it was 8 for 2 abstentions.
Okay.
I think. Sorry. So that's the chairman's confused me. I'm sorry about that. Am I alone?
2 for...
So can we rerun the vote in light of that?
10 altogether.
Yeah, I know it's 10 altogether. Those for the officers is 8 against, 1 and abstentions 1. I just wanted that to be clear for the webcast. So the officer's recommendation is carried.
Right, I think that finishes that application. So we'll move on to item 11, exclusion of public and press.
No reason
to include them. I should have mentioned about item 7 site visits, but no one brought it up, so that's all okay. So yes, that's the end of the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed.